Almost 13 years ago, I was helping a friend leave her husband, and it was amicable. Everything was fine until it wasn't. And we'd gone one time. She got some of her stuff. We went back a second time, and he was waiting. He was waiting in the garage. And we walked in and opened the door, and there he was. Now, my friend was taller than me, so I didn't see the gun until I heard the shot, and she was laying at my feet. Trigger warning, friends. And I didn't know what to do because I'm in Canada and we have really strict gun laws. This should not have happened here. An angel spoke and said, run. So I did. I turned and left the garage and I ran. As I was exiting the garage, the same voice spoke and said, you should scream, you need help. To which I did, because I definitely needed help and so did my friend. I went to the first house beside hers and had the door been open, I'd have been in their living room. It wasn't. I went to the next house and the voice spoke for a third time and said, you have a cell phone. You should call for help. So I did. I got out my BlackBerry. 13 years ago, that was all the rage. And I made the phone call. And what began was a desperate look for relief from the anxiety and fear that I was now carrying. My friend died and her husband committed suicide. And she was the principal of the school where I volunteered. So everybody was watching me because everybody knew I was with her when she died. And there were comments like, if you're going to be okay, we'll be okay. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of pressure. So I felt the pressure, A, to be okay, and B, to find a way to be okay, because how do you process this kind of thing? I did 3 years of talk therapy, which was lovely. The woman is fabulous. She's a friend of mine. But it did nothing. It didn't relieve my anxiety or my fear. It gave me lots of labels and a great place to cry. But that was pretty much it. 7 years later, I took coaching training. My kids were getting older. They were married and moving on with their lives. And my husband kept asking that annoying question. So what are you going to do now? I'm like, I don't know. I've been a stay-at-home mom all of my life, loved my job. But eventually you work your way out of a job. And it looks totally different when they're adults and when they have children than it did before. So I got coaching training, and it was at one of those trainings, a woman said she discovered tapping, and it really helps with her anxiety. I'm like, I raised my hand, please tell me more, because I was desperate. Every day the anxiety chugged along about my cheek level. Every day I woke up with it. It was unrelenting. Something simple would happen, like, where's my purse? Well, it was on the seat beside me, but it was covered by a shopping bag, so I couldn't see it. That sent me drowning in anxiety. And then sleep would rewire it back to about my cheek level. Day in, day out, nothing really helped. And the fear. I couldn't go to a friend's home if I didn't know them really, really well. I couldn't open doors if I didn't know who was behind it, because that was the scenario. We didn't know he was behind the door. And I was just generally anxious all of the time. My life had changed in ways that I regularly cried out to the universe, this isn't fair. I'm a good person. I didn't deserve this. And if you're spiritual at all, I yelled at God. I'm like, God, I did not deserve this. I followed you my whole life. This isn't fair. Well, when she said she's discovered tapping, I downloaded the book from Emotional Freedom Technique International. It's a group out of the UK that I'm certified with. And I had a friend that I was doing just basic life coaching with, but I felt that something was missing. Because you can talk, and what you're doing is accessing the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our executive functioning where we make decisions, where we decide things. And we decide things there, and then our subconscious laughs at us. Because our subconscious is driving the bus 95% of the time. Prefrontal cortex is only getting 5%. So it's like when you go on a diet and you decide, I'm not going to eat those cookies. You're very sure you've made a decision with your prefrontal cortex. And your subconscious goes, yes, you are. A, because they taste good. They release endorphins, the feel-good endorphins, which makes you feel good. And you just generally like them. So we had to find a way to tap into the subconscious and to also tap into what's stored in our bodies. Every event that happens to us is stored somewhere on a cellular level. It's stored in our energy field, which is about 6 feet outside of us, and it's stored on a cellular level in our bodies. So a thought becomes a feeling becomes a sensation somewhere in your body. Like when you watch a scary movie and you're like, oh, I'm afraid. Maybe your stomach clenches. Maybe your shoulders go up. Maybe your throat tightens. those emotions, especially if they're tied to a big T trauma, are stuck in your body forever. What do you do with them? Do you live with the heartburn? Do you live with the gastrointestinal issues that are caused, possibly, because stuff has been pushed down there? It's one of the reasons why one of the number one prescriptions is GERD, for acid reflux. It doesn't solve the problem because you've got stuff in there. So I said to her, do you want to try this? I wasn't trained. I just read the book. I didn't really know what I was doing. And she had phenomenal results. She was off work, in bed, couldn't function, and within a few weeks she was back to work. I'm like, okay, there's something really good here. So I began training. I got certified. I'm now an advanced practitioner. And I began to work with some really skilled people in the energy world. And that changed everything. I was able to process the shooting and release it out of my body and my cells. And I was able to be free. I can open doors. If I don't know who's behind them, I can go to a new friend's home. Whereas before, there was no hope. I'm not going to your home. I was safe at the other place. There was no reason to think something was going to go horribly wrong. And it did. Then about 2 years after I got certified, I was speaking at a conference. I love to share my story. And the main reason I love to share it is because I want people to know there's hope. You do not have to stay the way that you are. And I'm sure lots of you have tried absolutely everything and nothing really worked. It just didn't do it. And that was my story until I found energy medicine and realized there was a way to tap into, pun intended, tap into what was stuck inside of our bodies and in our subconscious. So a friend of mine was doing tuning fork sessions. And I'm like, oh, will you do that for me? And she did. And it was another major transformative moment where my stomach had still been bothering me. And suddenly my stomach felt better. I'm like, okay, we got to add tuning forks to my toolkit. And I did. And the best part of all of this is everything that I do is done online. I don't have an in-person practice. I don't see people in person. Everything is done virtually. I can access your energy field. I can access your bodies. I can access it all with your permission, of course. And major things can shift. For instance, say you were in a car accident in a blue car, and now you can't get into blue cars anymore because in your subconscious, blue cars are not safe. We can process that event, release the trauma of it, and you can get into blue cars again. And it's just amazing. Tapping has been around for, I think, close to 40 years. It's been a long time. And it wasn't well received by the therapeutic community. It still isn't. Because it seems too good to be true. You're telling me if I tap on upper parts of my face, like acupressure points, things are going to happen and it's going to happen fast? No, it can't be true. Plus, we didn't have scientific data to be able to say, hey, we can prove that this works. Now there's two major researchers. One is in Australia, Dr. Patty Stapleton, one's in the US, Dawson Church, and they have literally done hundreds of studies, peer-reviewed, double-blind studies. So some people would get sham points, so you might tap behind your ears. That's not a point. And then the other group would get the actual points. And what the data showed was the people with the actual tapping points had incredible results, and people who were doing the sham points didn't really have anything. So now we have peer-reviewed double-blind studies to be able to say, yeah, this works, and it's replicatable. They replicated the things many, many times. Dawson's most famous study that he did was with veterans in the U.S., and for PTSD for veterans, there was almost no treatment except self-medication, drugs, alcohol, or prescription drugs, and neither of which is a long-term solution. He worked with a group of veterans and found that with tapping, your cortisol levels, and cortisol is your stress hormone that your body releases in times of danger or even just big events. Cortisol levels, they measured them before with saliva tests, they measured them after, they reduced by 45%. That's an astounding number. In fact, they reduced so much that some of the veterans no longer met the criteria for PTSD, which is amazing. They could now have a life free of fear, free of anxiety, free of dropping on the ground when they heard a car backfire because it felt like a gunshot. It felt like they were back in the jungle of Hanoi or they were in the sands of Afghanistan. So there was at last real hope for them to be able to press forward. Some of the other fascinating things about EFT is that the shifts that happen last. So not only are we shifting beliefs, we're rewiring your brain. Petta Stapleton has done fMRI studies to show the changes in the brain that have happened. So we're rewiring the patterns in your brain that have been there for a really long time. So if you run a thought pattern that says, I'll never lose weight, it's hopeless, you're running that pattern in your brain. Tapping can shift that pattern so you can write a new story and perhaps lose the weight. So we rewire your brain, we change your body, and the effects are permanent. They last. As far as we know, the things that have shifted with energy work have never been undone. And there's no side effects. There's no downside to tapping. The only caveat I would say to that is if you have big trauma in your life, childhood abuse, or in my case, a shooting, something like that, don't do it yourself. Lots of stuff you can do with tapping and EFT all by yourself. And the difference between emotional freedom technique and tapping is something I do on my own. I'm in my car. This guy cuts me off. I'm scared. He cut me off. I'm scared. I could have died. I can release that from my body if it's a really big thing. You can't hold yourself safe, the space of safety, and still process it and release it. So if you got stuff that's really big, find a practitioner and work with them to be able to release the stuff from your past that is currently affecting your present. So it's really cool to see how there's hope for the future, how you do not have to be dragged around in your present moment by things that happened years ago. I also had a very traumatic childhood, and that was affecting my present. And I've worked through a bunch of that. There's always more work to do. And I've released it so that it no longer controls who I am. You can change that image that you have as a child. As a child, I was a dirty little unkept, neglected child who wasn't worth anything. I've shifted that belief. I no longer believe that. I'm not that person. I am a strong, capable, confident woman who's a gifted practitioner who can light the path and show you the way to freedom from fears, freedom from anxiety, freedom from beliefs that are holding you captive. There's a really powerful scene in The West Wing. I love The West Wing. It's one of my favorite shows, where John Spencer says to a guy who's just come out of a therapy session, and he said, there was a guy who fell in a hole, and a priest walked by and he called for help. The priest wrote down a prayer, threw it down, and kept going. He's like, well, that doesn't help me. A psychiatrist walked by and gave him some techniques and kept going. He's still in the hole. That didn't help him. His friend walked by, and his friend jumped in the hole with him. And he said to his friend, what good is that? Now we're both stuck here. He goes, no, I've been in this hole before. I can show you the way out. So the biggest thing that I want to say to people is, I've been in the hole. I've been there before. And there is a way out. It is possible to get out of that hole. You don't have to stay there. I have a client who thought she had borderline personality disorder, daily panic attacks, couldn't leave the house, couldn't manage life. We started working together. Those things are gone. She's managing her life. She doesn't have daily panic attacks. She can leave the house voluntarily without being forced. I have to get groceries. I have no choice. A life she never dreamed was possible is now in her hands. And she's becoming an EFT practitioner because she wants to give the hope that she now feels to others. She wants to share the freedom, the release, the options that are now available that she never had before. So if you're struggling, if you've tried everything, conventional medicine, you've cried out to God, if you've tried it all, feel free to reach out to myself or to another EFT practitioner because there's a way forward. Most of the practitioners have been in the hole and they know how to get out of it.